Greetings ladies and gents, this is Mr. S. Welcome back to my channel. There's a common phrase when it comes to art supplies that I will find myself repeating to others, just the same as anybody else, which is that when it comes to art supplies, you get what you pay for. And most of the time that is very much true. So, it's interesting then that if you asked me a couple of years ago if you wanted to expand your marker collection to expand to the next highest level of marker materials, if Copic markers were the right way to go, I would have definitely 100%, not even a question, said yes. It's interesting now that I think my answer would now have to include a yes, but with the statement. And I want to talk about why. Because it seems like a very strange thing for me to be so hesitant about recommending Copic markers when, for the longest time, they've been an industry-leading product. And with good reason. The one thing I won't say about Copics is that they're a bad supply. They are a very good marker. They're among the best. And reasons why I would say that they're among the best is very simple. They have an excellent ink laydown. The ink quality in terms of its saturation and its color is very, very excellent. They hold a lot of ink at a time, so as opposed to some of the cheaper brands out there, they don't hold nearly as much ink. The reservoir inside isn't nearly as saturated, so you get, most of the time, you would have the ink in a Copic marker last a lot longer. Their brush tip is among the best in the field, allowing you to get very small, intricate little marks, as well as going very large, allowing you to cover a large area in relatively little time. And it has an interior structure that means that it won't bend out of shape and stay that way. Instead, it will always spring back to where it's supposed to be. One of the other biggest reasons why Copic is an industry-leading marker has everything to do with the fact that they are refillable, and for every single color in the 350 Copic sketch color spectrum, they sell one of these bottles of various ink. And these ink bottles will refill your sketch marker, I believe, about 8 times. They also sell another line of Copic called the Chows. These have a smaller amount of the color range, but they're also cheaper. And these will get refilled by one of these bottles, I believe, about 12 times. So it tells you how much is this one's able to hold versus this one. So it's my belief that this bottle right here that can hold 25 cc's of ink is one of the biggest reasons why Copic is so widely regarded as being the best of the field. Because ostensibly, the belief used to be that once you bought one of these markers, you would never have to buy another one because you could just refill this. I say used to be because now we get to the part where the whole reason for this video came about. You see this handy little bottle here, and I've got quite a few of them. I would typically replace the colors that I use the most and the ones that I really, really needed, because I have over the years gradually filled out my collection of Copic markers to include about 120 of their colors over the years to kind of fill in the gaps of what I believed I needed more colors from. So I don't have refills for every single one of those. No, you really don't need that. You'll typically find your favorites and will find the refills that you need just for those particular ones. But these bottles cost about $6, give or take shipping, but base price is about $6. The problem is you can't get these anymore. At least Copic has stopped making these. What they now make is this right here. Now this bottle you're seeing right there is a new revamped design from Copic that, for whatever reason, probably to get more money, I wish I don't have to be that cynical, but it seems like it, they have redesigned that bottle to only hold 12 cc's of ink, as opposed to the 25 that this one holds. And it costs the exact same that this used to cost. Now, Copic's official statement is that they're trying to reduce the amount of plastic that is in landfills and dumps around the world, which, when you think about it, doesn't actually make much sense. I'm guessing they made the bottles smaller than this one, and maybe the plastic is a little bit, I don't know, skinnier or thinner, but if you want to fill a marker the same amount of times that this one will fill a marker, you'd have to buy at least 2 of the new ink refills, at least, because I've seen and heard reports that those new bottles only fill a marker maybe twice, as opposed to the 8 times that Copic claims it can refill it. I don't believe that. So regardless of the reasoning, the fact is that now, when you want to buy a refill for a Copic marker, you're either going to be buying a refill twice as often as opposed to getting this one, or you're going to have to pay exorbitant amount of money to get these from online third-party sellers who are scalping the prices of these because they've been discontinued, or it's probably more cost-effective at this point to just throw your old Copic marker away and go buy another marker of that color, which, again, defeats the entire reason that that Copic has been an industry-leading standard, which is that you don't have to buy another marker, but now it's more cost-effective to do so, making these really feel like nothing more than the typical disposable alcohol-based markers that a lot of the cheaper companies are just throwing out there. So with all of that said, the most important thing for me to make sure you understand is that my feelings on Copic got to the point where I didn't want to use them anymore to make art, because when they ran out, I would not be able to replace them nearly as cost effectively as I could before. So it made me not want to use an art supply that I own, which, as an artist, is one of the worst feelings that I think we can possibly have. Being scared to use an expensive supply because it's not as easy or financially sensible to do as it was before. I hope I now can make it a little bit clearer to you as to why I can't say Copic is the way to go anymore as confidently as I could before. So then it led to another train of thought, which was, well, if Copic isn't the way to go, is there another kind of marker out there that can compete with Copic in terms of its overall quality? And if so, which one is it? Well, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different alcohol-based markers out there, and it can be really overwhelming to try to figure out which ones you even want to try or which ones you should even go for. So what I really wanted more than anything else was a couple of basic things. I wanted the marker to have a brush tip, not a bullet nib and not a fine tip, specifically a brush tip. I wanted it to have a large variety of colors, and probably the most important thing that I wanted the alcohol-based marker to do was the colors needed to be able to blend. because I have tried a couple of markers in the past, specifically ones from Dick Blick, where the color laydown is really great, but they do not blend with themselves in any way, shape, or form, and that's one of the best things about Copic and what it's able to do. So those three things actually go a long way towards narrowing the choices down to a pretty decent little number. And after comparing all of them, after watching a lot of videos, and after a lot of just time spent thinking about it, I decided to try out and invest in a company called Ohuhu. Now, Ohuhu does have a line, about 200 colors total, but the 200 color line specifically just has a chisel tip and a fine tip. What I wanted was the Ohuhu brush alcohol markers, and from that they have a base set that goes up to 120 of them, and they just released an additional 48 colors in a pastel color range to supplement the one they had previously. So a grand total of about 168 colors are available in the brush line, making it about the same, if not a few more, than you can get with the Copic Chow sets. One of the big things that drew me to Ohuhu was seeing reviews and seeing people use them and checking out the brush tip. Now, the brush tip is, from what I saw, rather exceptional, being able to withstand quite a bit of usage and without losing its edge or losing its shape. I was also very impressed when I saw people compare Copic markers and Ohuhu markers with just how well the colors from the Ohuhu line were actually blending together on the page. Seeing repeat after repeat after repeat of people proclaiming that these work exceptionally well made me feel comfortable enough to give them a try, to give them a proper testing for myself. I'll go into more details in a little bit about the markers, specifically in terms of my experience with them, but the main reason for this particular video is that I wanted to show how the Ohuhus compare with Copics when I'm using them, specifically my experience with them. So what I did is I drew up a coloring page version of Sailor Moon, and I'm going to color this entirely with the Copic markers, and then color another copy of it entirely with the Ohuhu markers. I'm going to talk about my experience using both of them, the pros and cons of each, and then at the end, I'm going to try to make some sort of verdict as to if I was to recommend one of these to you, which would it be and why? So I think it's only fair to start off with the marker that I'm most comfortable using, the Copic marker. Let's get going. So since I've already talked about the various ink little debacle to death at this point, let's just focus on the marker itself and the user experience with it. Well, the first thing is that if you get Copic markers, you're going to be better off creating and making a swatch sheet yourself. Using the caps for them, in terms of trying to figure out which color to use, can lead to a little bit of frustration. Like, for example, you're going to see throughout this piece that while the skin tones matched up really well together, I will freely admit that I made a mistake in the yellow color that I chose for Sailor Moon's hair. The base color is just a bit too neon yellow and didn't really want to play ball with perfectly blending with the rest of the colors of the hair that I chose. But that's life, what you gonna do. That's what I get for not referring to my swatch sheet. Now the markers themselves. Well, the two kinds that I have are the Copic Chow, which is the smaller one that is completely rounded, and the Copic Sketch, which holds a lot more ink and is more oval shaped. Now both of them have the exact same ink, that both of them have the exact same brush. So laying down color and blending the color with the Copic markers is a great experience. It feels really nice to use them in that regard. I do have a little bit of an issue with the Copic Sketch for two reasons, and keep in mind these are also entirely subjective reasons, but I feel I should bring them up considering the fact that Copic markers go for about $10 per individual one. The Copic sketch with its rounded, more oval-like design does mean that it doesn't roll away very easily on any surface, but it does mean that it's possible to pick it up and have it in the wrong position to fit well within the hand, and you have to sort of rotate it around in your hand a little bit to get it to the optimal spot. Whereas with the chow, since it's completely rounded, you can pick it up and use it right away with very little issue, except maybe to rotate it to get the little nubbins on the caps away from your fingers. The other very minor thing for me is the fact that on the Copic sketch, you cannot put the cap that you just took off onto the back of the marker. Many people probably won't see that as a big deal, but it is to me because it is a little bit frustrating when I'm using a lot of Copics at once, because I need to do quick blending, to have a big pile of caps just sitting off to the side, and it can be very easy to lose them. Whereas once again with the chows, they have the actual ability to slip the cap onto the back of the marker, but for some reason on some it fits snugly and tight, and some just will not stick on, and some just kind of slide right off. It's very strange to me. But as I said, those are subjective things and those are minor things, but considering the price of the Copic marker, I do believe they're worth bringing up. Now, the last thing that I will say in regards to the sketch markers and even the Copic chows as a bit of a con is going back to that brush tip that I just heaped so much praise on. At the same time, it is a little bit on the wider side at the tip, meaning that while you can get small details, you can't get really fine details. I wanted to just use these markers for almost the entirety of this piece, and as you'll see, or have seen, with the eyelashes, the tips of them are a little bit on the blunt side, because even as intricately and as delicately as I could work, they still ended up being a little bit blunted at the tip just because of the way the tip of the Copic marker is designed. But at the end of the day, Copic marker is still a very high quality product and easily stands above a good chunk of alcohol-based markers out there. The user experience is very positive with only a few niggling little flaws, that setting aside the various ink refills, of course. And you can't argue with the results that the Copic markers give you, provided, of course, you choose the correct colors to actually blend well together. Bottom line, Copic marker is a very good product, and it's easy to see why it stood near the top of the industry for as long as it has. Now let's move on to the challengers in this round, the Ohuhu brush tip markers. Now, first thing is I love the extra little things that Ohuhu provides for you when you purchase these sets. Chief among them being that they actually include some color swatch cards for you, all preset and ready to be filled in. I love filling in swatch sheets, and it makes me even happier when they're professionally laid out as opposed to the rather jerry-rigged ones that I have to do because I have terrible handwriting. The Ohuhu markers basically to me feel like a beefed up redesign of the Copic chows. The rounded barrel feels fantastic in my hand. When I hold it, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. And even better, the cap on every single marker can be snapped onto the back with no problem of it falling off anytime soon. The whole marker itself sits in my hand excellently, and it just surprisingly feels very high quality, especially considering the fact that when you take the price of each marker individually for what I paid less than $1 per marker in both of these sets. Now, the actual experience of using the Ohuhu markers, it was amazing. laying down the color for the first time on Sailor Moon's face, because this is actually the first time that I've used them. I just wanted a nice, pure, unrestricted, unfiltered response to them. It felt, again, it felt amazing. Laying this down, there was no streaking, there was no color fade that you would see in a lot of cheaper brands. The color and the ink laid down effortlessly with each stroke. The marker never felt like it was running low. Every marker that I used, especially even the ones that I filled out on the swatch sheets and then used in the piece, never felt like they were running out. They never had any squeaking to them. That again, if you buy a cheaper brand, you can usually run into the problem of the markers being half emptied or half dried out by the time you get them. I was even more impressed when I could see for myself the fact that the ink in these markers blends together beautifully. Especially, again, as you'll see later, I chose a much better color layout for Sailor Moon's hair this time, and everything worked really, really well. The colors blended effortlessly. I had to almost put in no pressure or even much effort to have them blend on their own. And even the ones that didn't blend totally, they still had a little bit of a fade to them, which is something I would expect from a much more expensive marker than this one. The thing that really, really got me though was when I went to color in Sailor Moon's eyelashes, and the brush tip on the Ohuhu marker is just a little bit skinnier on the very end than the Copic brush marker is, meaning that I could get into the tiny portions, the tiny tips of her eyelashes and be able to color them in with no blunting of the edge or anything of that sort. This brush tip can get into some of the tiniest areas of detail without any real problems. Throughout my entire time using these markers for the whole piece, I never found any fraying, I never found any problems with the tip itself. All of them have still held up by the end with no issues. Now, are there cons to these markers? I would say yes, but again, not with the marker itself. The main con with the Ohuhu markers is what you would find as a con with almost any other of the cheaper brands, which is the fact that Ohuhu does not sell their entire stock of markers individually. But I will say at the time of recording this, about 12 of the markers that Ohuhu makes for the brush line are now being sold open stock, meaning you can buy them individually. And they're continuing to add more to that line as customer feedback tells them which ones are the most popular and which ones are the ones that are being used more. So Ohuhu is listening to its customers. So this potential con is slowly, hopefully, going to become less of a problem. And then of course you come across the other issue with basically any other marker brand that isn't Copic, which is selling refills. Right now, since they don't sell them open stock, you do still have to buy a larger set in order to maybe get a few of the markers that you need. But again, with that being said, Ohuhu is again listening to its customers and is engaging with them and has alerted us that they are working right now on making refills available for the colors, more than likely the ones that they're selling open stock because those are the most popular. So I do find it really interesting that the main cons that I can come up with these markers are both things that have been addressed and are being worked on as we speak. I suppose I could also say that there is only 160 colors as opposed to 350 from Copic, but to be honest, I really don't understand why you would need that many colors, especially if they blend on the paper. You can mix your own colors if you don't have the one specific shade or tint that you need, but that's just me. Bottom line, user experience with these Ohuhu markers was excellent, supremely excellent, which then brings us to the ultimate question. Do these compare with Copic's? And which one do I believe you should go for? Well, honestly, the answer to that question comes down to something very simple for me. And that is, which one do I feel more comfortable recommending that you check out? That's a question that, if you asked me it a couple years ago when I got my first few Copic markers from a clearance sale at my local Hobby Lobby, I would have said 100% go with Copic. Because at that point, there was no reason to not recommend them. Because they still had the bottles that would hold the most ink, and it still made sense price-wise to go with them. But now that you're paying $10 a marker, now that you're paying $6 per refill that you're going to have to buy twice as many of to get the same amount of value from your original ink refills, I don't feel like it makes sense from a money perspective to do that. But at the same time, not every single color from the Ohuhu line is available for open stock purchase. But I think I'm ultimately going to side now with the Ohuhu markers. I believe that when I have to think really, really hard about if these two experiences were any different, that says a lot about Ohuhu as opposed to Copic. Because using the Ohuhus while I colored this piece felt almost the exact same as when I used the Copics. The blending felt the same, the color laydown felt the same. But using the markers felt better to me for the Ohuhus because I liked the way it felt in my hand, and I liked the fact that even if I run out of colors from this set that are not available for open stock purchase, considering the fact that almost all of their sets make it so that each marker you buy in that set is less than $1, that says to me that it makes far more sense if you're just talking about a business perspective or a buying perspective as a consumer. It makes far more sense to me to go with the one that A, is a whole lot cheaper, B, has just the same experience and build quality as the Copic sketch, and C, has a company that, from my experience, seems to be genuinely engaged and interested in what its customers have to say. As opposed to Copic, who I think are relatively detached and are almost just sort of languishing and like resting back on their laurels and very smug and confident that people will keep buying their stuff because of the name associated with them. They're Copic. Who else can compete with them? I believe Ohuhu can. And does that mean that I'm going to stop using my Copic markers? Absolutely not. I'm still going to use them. I'm still going to refill the ones that I have available. But as to if I'm going to buy any new ones, maybe not. Especially since I'm working right now on seeing if a Copic marker and an Ohuhu marker can be blended together. And if so, that means that these Copics gain even more use because they can supplement my new favorite marker. I would recommend, if nothing else, if you want to get into using alcohol-based markers, these are not only some of the cheapest out there, but they are absolutely some of the best quality you can find. Just make sure that if you want the alcohol ones, you make sure it says the Ohuhu alcohol-based brush markers. If you do that, I believe you'll be in very good hands, not only from the marker, but by the people that make it too. Let me know down below if you've tried any other marker brands that you personally like, and if so, what do you like about them? Do you agree or disagree with what I have to say here? If so, again, I'd love to hear about it. But until then, thank you all for sticking around and watching my stuff this whole time. This has been Mr. S, and until next time, Have yourselves a good day, my friends.